There are three major types of resource within EASI, which we can see by navigating to the Explore Resources page, which is going to show us all the resources available to my user account, and filtering by resource type. Environments are complete emulated computing systems. Every environment contains a combination of software and a relevant emulator to recreate the legacy computing hardware necessary to run that software. We can search for the particular software you might be interested in, for instance, FileMaker Pro, and receive a list of relevant results, all of which are environments. For just one example, we might see this Windows 95 plus FileMaker Pro 3.0 environment, go to its details page, and see it is built on an emulator template that recreates the hardware of a generic 90s PC. So it has 64 megabytes of RAM, a Cirrus Logic video card, a Sound Blaster 16 audio card, etc. Now let's clear our filters and talk about another type of EASI resource: software. Software resources in EASI refers to installation media for various software applications or products. These items can be loaded, installed, and saved into environments in order to expand the capabilities of that environment, and I will demonstrate this functionality more in a moment. Finally, content resources refers quite broadly to any item or object from a digital collection. Generally speaking, these might be unique digital acquisitions, as opposed to software resources, which refers to non-unique software dependencies. Content resources might be disk images taken from a particular floppy disk or CD, or they might just be arbitrary files, such as this Word document. And it's important to note that content could also be executable. It might be something that people consider software in a context outside of EASI. The point is that within EASI, content is the target of our emulation efforts. EASI workflows are built on the idea that we add software into environments in order to solve dependency problems and provide access to content items such as this file by rendering them in their original context or as close to it as possible. The distinction between software and content is much more conceptual than technical. So let's take a look at what happens when we put all these pieces together into action. I'm going to start by navigating to the Import Resource page so that I can upload some new software and content files that I would like to try with EASI. I'll start with Import Content, and I'm going to name and select a legacy Borland Quattro spreadsheet that I happen to have on hand. Using the menu here, I can name and select my sample file. And I can use the File Selector tool here, or I could even just drag and drop from another window. And the most important thing here is that for the physical format option, I'm going to double check that I've selected File, because this is just an arbitrary file, not a disk image representing a CD-ROM or floppy disk or any other kind of physical storage medium. Then I'll go back up and click Finish Import to upload the file. And here you'll see, once a resource has been successfully imported, the EASI interface automatically takes you to the Imported Resources tab on the My Resources page. So rather than looking at all of the resources available in your node, you can get a selection of just the resources that your individual user account has uploaded. And it's notable that at any point, you can also very quickly bookmark any resource you see, so you can quickly get back to it later if you want to find it again, or if it's something you tend to use over and over. Now I happen to know from context, from the source where I got this sample file, that my spreadsheet was created with an older version of a program called Borland Quattro, and that I'm going to need that same software to open and render it properly. As it happens, I have also acquired a copy of Borland Quattro Pro 5.0, so I'm going to return to the Import Resource page, and this time I'm going to select Import Software, because Quattro is a dependency that I need to install in an environment before I can get to my content. So again, I'm going to name my resource, and this time I'm going to select all three of the disks that make up my Quattro Pro installer. And I'm going to change the physical format for all of them to floppy, because these are disk images made from floppy disks, and I'm going to want my emulated environment to treat them like they would a physical floppy. Now finally, I'm going to need an environment that can run Quattro Pro. So I'm going to do a search for an appropriate operating system. Let's pick Windows 98. And we have a lot of options, but I'm specifically going to look for one that's labeled a base, because I'm probably not going to need a lot of other extra applications like FileMaker or AutoCAD just to view this spreadsheet. I'm just going to want to install Quattro Pro. When I found the environment I want to try, I'm going to select it, and from the Actions menu that pops up on the side here, I'm going to select Add Software, and I'll get a drop-down menu of all the software resources I have available to me, including the Quattro Pro 5.0 resource that we just imported. And selecting that is going to bring up the Emulation Access interface. So here we finally actually see a running environment in action. Once Windows 98 has booted up, just as I would with an actual physical machine from the 90s, I'm going to go to my computer and open up the A drive to look for the Quattro Pro software installer that I selected. Remember, because it was a floppy type software resource, so it's going to be in the floppy drive in Windows. And there it is, and using this emulation, I can now run through the whole setup program. And at a certain point, I'll be prompted to insert the additional disks from the installer. And you can see by going up to the Change Resource Media button at the top of the Access interface here, I can select the second disk image in the installer, and will continue just as if I had physically ejected and inserted a new floppy into the machine. And I can repeat that as many times as needed. So now I have an environment with all the software dependencies I need for that spreadsheet, Windows 98 and Quattro Pro. To do so, I made changes to the original Windows 98 base environment by installing Quattro Pro. So to make sure my changes are saved and available for that content, I'm going to shut down the emulated Windows 98, and then use the Save Environment button here. And I'm going to select New Environment, because I both want this new Windows 98 plus Borland Quattro Pro 5.0 as its own standalone environment, but I also want the original base environment to stay where it is, so that we can repeat this process later if we need an entirely different combination of software and content with just vanilla Windows 98. So again, using the search and bookmarks here, I can confirm that both the environment I just saved and the original Windows 98 base environment continue to exist, and I can use either of them moving forward. So we can chain and fork off of our work in different directions using the EASI platform, depending on what we need. But now we can finally get back to that spreadsheet. And this time I'm going to make use of the Emulation project page, which we haven't seen yet. I've already bookmarked the resources we need, but now I'm going to select them both and click on Add to Emulation Project from the Actions menu, so that we can add them to our active queue here. And if I go over to the Emulation project page, I can see both the Windows 98 plus Quattro Pro 5.0 environment and the demo spreadsheet content resource available. and I'm going to make sure both of them are actively selected because I want to try to run them together. Now, if I wasn't totally confident that this spreadsheet required Quattro Pro, maybe I'm not actually sure which version of Quattro I'm going to need, perhaps, or maybe I also want to see what the file looks like in Microsoft Excel or Lotus 123 or any other spreadsheet application. By adding several possible environments to the emulation project, I would be able to return to this page, toggle between active options, and quickly evaluate those possible environments against each other in emulation, rather than having to do a lot of hunt and peck. But with the spreadsheet content and my Quattro environment selected, I'm going to click Run Environment, and once again, we'll return to the Emulation Access interface. This time, however, instead of the Quattro installation floppies, we should see our content mounted. And since this content object, the spreadsheet, is an arbitrary file, we're actually going to look for it in the Windows D drive, the same place we would as if a CD-ROM type object was mounted. This is just the most convenient approach for us to load arbitrary files or file sets into emulated environments at this time. The ISO 9660 file system that most CD-ROMs use is very, very broadly compatible across a wide range of legacy operating systems from the personal computing era. So packaging up a file type object into an ISO file system and mounting it like a CD-ROM allows us to load arbitrary files into emulated environments without really having to think much about what specific operating system or software is running inside that environment. So we'll run Quattro Pro, go to Open and select our file here. And there you have it. Our legacy file is now available in original software. Now, just as we saved Windows 98 plus Quattro Pro in its own environment, separate from the original Windows 98 base environment, we can do that again here and save this spreadsheet in its own environment so we can return to it quickly later. Once again, I'll shut down the operating system, go up to Save Environment, give our new content environment a name, and save as a new environment. And here it is, now available for me to return to whenever I want to show off that file. There you have it. This is a typical easy workflow combining environment, software, and content resources in the platform in order to gain access to a legacy digital object.